Welcome back to the 1,000 Recordings to Hear Before You Die. We are now on episode 4, albums 10, 11 and 12. And last time we covered some acoustic country folk singer-songwriting stuff. We went back into the world of jazz. And today we are in for a real treat because we are about to have an absolute slew of guitar legends, and I couldn't be more excited. The musical randomizer has really blessed us this time. So without further ado, let's get into these albums, and we're about to see a parade of brilliant guitarists. Album number 10 of this series, into double figures. We've only got another 990 to go. Is from a legendary artist band, the Yardbirds, active from 1963 to 68. They actually reformed in the 90s, but I've gone with their primary active years when they had some absolutely amazing musicians. So during that period, it will be the starting band for Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page, who obviously now are all legendary artists, either in their own right in the terms of Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck, and with Led Zeppelin, who Jimmy Page formed when the Yardbirds broke up in 1968. They released 5 studio albums originally, and they've released 1 in 2003, so a total of 6 studio albums, and they were quite rightfully inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992, and they've got a whole slew of other awards. The other one I really like is that Rolling Stone listed them as number 89 of the 100 greatest artists of all time, and probably due to just how influential the Yardbirds' music is and was, and the members they had as well. And the album we're going to be looking at today is called Roger the Engineer in the UK, where I'm from, and it's called Over Under Sideways Down. Elsewhere we're going to call it Roger the Engineer. Let's have a look at it. Roger the Engineer was released in 1966. It has a running time of 35 minutes and 52 seconds and consists of 12 tracks, all written by the band, all originals. And another fun one from Rolling Stone, they listed it as number 349 of the 500 greatest albums of all time, so some quite high acclaim from contemporary pundits for this one. And let's give it a listen and see what we think of the Yardbirds' Roger the Engineer. Our first legendary guitar album of the day, Roger the Engineer by the Yardbirds, and it's brilliant. And I've been very lucky in that there is a 2020 release, September 2020 remaster of this album. I've listened to the Yardbirds before, and one of the things I struggle with is that the recording quality back when they recorded in the 60s can be quite difficult to listen to, quite grainy and quite thin. And they've done an amazing job on this remaster, so I thoroughly recommend that. It sounds really thick, really full, really rocky. It's fantastic. And the songs and the style is right up my street. It's a good old-fashioned rock and roll album from the 60s, from a load of absolutely brilliant musicians and songwriters, and easily worth being on the list of 1,000 recordings to hear before you die. And I wouldn't say that the guitar work on here is anything astounding. They're not ripping off Hendrix-like solos, and the songs themselves aren't anything too outside the rock and roll formula, but they're just done so well. They're so disciplined in the way they play. The riffs and the lyrics are really, really good, and the style does change between songs as well. It's not a samey album. It really does move you up and down in tempo and keep you on your toes and keep you interested the whole way through. So fantastic album. Please give it a listen. It's a wonderful, wonderful record. And my 2 tracks I picked out were Over Under Sideways Down, which would be the title track if you were outside the UK, and the Nas Are Blue, which is my favourite because it just has this brilliant rock and roll feel. It's just got a lot of like gusto to it, you know. It hits you with a rock and roll riff and it keeps going the whole way through, and it's just a wonderful track on a wonderful record. And now let's see what Mr. Moon thinks. I'm guessing that part of the reason this is here is because of the legacy of the band. Now for a little bit more intelligent analysis from our expert in all things musical recordings, and the reason this Yardbirds album is in here is because of the guitar sound, and it would appear that this was when Jeff Beck took over on lead guitar from Eric Clapton. So Eric Clapton had left the band over a dispute over sound and had joined a band called the Blues Breakers, and Beck is now on lead guitar, and Jimmy Page is also still on guitar. So you've got tracks with Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page playing, and essentially it's saying that here that this is when Jeff Beck really started to drive modern rock music with his guitar lines and his style, and that's what makes it such a great album. And that there are certain songs where he just played stuff at the time that would have been considered just plain weird, and nowadays we would think of it as just being really great rock guitar work, and that's why it's in the book, quite simply. And I couldn't agree more. It's a wonderful album, great guitar work. I think fairly subtle, but that could be because of the musical context of how music changes over time, and at the time revolutionary. Nowadays with everyone else has copied and improved and changed that basic sound and adapted it. So I think a lot of credit to the Yardbirds for really driving rock and roll in the early and mid 60s, and for also starting the careers of Led Zeppelin, Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton. And in terms of tracks that Tom Moon picked out, he picked the two I choose, which were Over, Under, Sideways Down and the Nazar Blue, but he also picked out Hot House of Omega Rashid, Jeff's Boogie, Psycho Daisies and Stroll On. So actually he loved it so much he chose half the album. So I think his recommendation would be probably just listen to the whole album because it's really good. And we will now move on to album number 11. Album 11 on our vlog series is from an artist who I really, really love, and I didn't see until a few years ago when I was watching some Rock and Roll Hall of Fame performances on YouTube, and on slide guitar was the one and only, the great Bonnie Raitt, and my God, is she good. She's an amazing slide guitarist, and she has been active since 1971. She has got loads of studio albums, as you can see, and what she has more than studio albums is Grammy nominations and wins. So 22 separate Grammy nominations, 11 Grammy wins, easily our most decorated artist of anyone we've had so far in the preceding 10 albums. And you know, I've never listened to a Bonnie Raitt record start to finish, so I'm very intrigued. And the album we have today is called Give It Up. It's her second studio album, so let's have a look at that one. Give It Up is Bonnie Raitt's second studio album, and it was released in 1972, September 1972 to be precise. It has a running time of 36 minutes and 4 seconds, and similar to the Yardbirds, they're in the same list here. This album is ranked at 495 in Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time list, so pretty highly rated, and I can't wait to give it a listen. So let's give it a listen and see what we think. Bonnie Raitt really does not disappoint, and this album, guitar-wise, is everything I was dreaming of. It is, at its heart, a rock blues crossover album, and you know, you take your track, you could call it a blues, you call it rock. It's kind of on that parallel, but amazingly, it's from the early 70s. You know, when rock and roll had really advanced into heavier formats. So that I absolutely love this album, and one of the things I really love about this album is not just Bonnie Raitt playing absolutely wonderful blues guitar, and it is really good blues guitar, either on slide or not on slide. She's a great guitarist, has great rhythms, great riffs, and she gets a really lovely feel and sound out of her guitar as well. It, you know, it sounds quite old-timey, but in a really, in just such a charming way. But the other thing is she uses swing instruments like brass, saxophone, trumpet really well to bring really up-tempo energy to songs like Give It Up or Let Me Go, and that really gives an extra dynamic to the album. It's almost got, you know, like a, I feel like you're at an old dance and there's just people rocking out so you can dance to it. It's a really cracking album, and thoroughly deserves all the praise that it gets, in my opinion. And the other thing I loved about this album is that Bonnie Raitt feels almost before her time as a female artist. And I'm not the best person to talk about female artists because I'm not female and I'm not really a music artist. But I think a lot of the themes in her songs would chime very well with a lot of the modern female pop artists of the day. So songs like Give It Up or Let Me Go are all about, don't mess me around. Stop mucking me about. And then another song I love, Love Me Like a Man, is talking about, I think, the romantic failings of men, and standing up for yourself and getting what you want. And that's a theme that really runs through this album. She's strong, she's powerful, she's got brilliant lyrics, she's a fantastic singer. The lyrics should not be underestimated. On Love Me Like a Man, she comes out with, I want a man who can take me home, not take me for a ride. And what a lyric! What a lyric that is. It's incredible. And it's cutting and it's fun. And so many good things to say about Bonnie Raitt. But again, her singing voice as well. She can just twist lyrics, and her enunciation of songs and things is fantastic. In terms of my two tunes, I've mentioned them already. I'm going to take the opening track, Give It Up or Let Me Go, because it's got so much energy, and it's got that lovely brass running through it. And Love Me Like a Man, because it's just so brilliantly cutting. It's a song where you feel she's been really annoyed by people and she's had enough, and she's just going to let it all out on a record, and boy does she. So if you want to listen to someone go to town on a previous men she's been around, give Love Me Like a Man a go. It's a great track musically. It's probably a better track lyrically. And now let's see what Mr. Moon has to say about Bonnie Raitt. Tom Moon's reasoning for including this album on the 1,000 Recordings to Hear Before You Die is because it's actually to do with the production of the album. It is Bonnie Raitt and how great she is, and her vocals and her guitar and her arrangements. It's also because apparently she went back to a small studio with a small band and record what feels like a soulful live album. And he said it's before she became super famous. So it's her second record. It's before she was a global megastar. And he feels that she had more freedom to express herself and to play the music that she wanted, that she loved. And that's what comes through with this record. You get all the cornerstones of Bonnie Raitt, so the great guitar work, the slide guitar, and the cutting vocals, which is something I picked out. She's a really good vocalist and a really good songwriter, and she can just cut people to pieces with a line. It's great to look at, and as someone that writes songs, I can't do anything other than just admire the way she writes. And he also brings up, the use of brass and other instruments to bring in some tone. But more than anything, he says it's just a really beautiful, really natural sounding album. There's no overdubbing or very minor overdubbing, and it doesn't feel overproduced, and it feels the way a Bonnie Raitt album should. And I'm 100% with him. It's a wonderful album, great guitar work, great singer, great songwriter. Please go away and listen to this album. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you haven't listened to Bonnie Raitt before. And in terms of the tracks that our expert picked out, the two are the same as mine. So Give It Up or Let Me Go and Love Me Like a Man. But he also went for Too Long at the Fair and Love Has No Pride. And now we'll move on to album number 12. And now for our final album of episode 4. And it is Irish guitar legend Rory Gallagher. And again, super excited to hear this album. I've never heard this album. I've never heard Rory Gallagher, if I'm perfectly honest. Not a name I was familiar with, but I now am. And what a musician. So let's have a look at Rory Gallagher. He is an Irish guitarist who unfortunately died quite young in 1995. As you can see here, he just plays an enormous variety of instruments, from being a singer to a guitarist, playing the mandolin, the banjo, but also weird things like the dulcimer. And he's released a fair few albums, you can see here, and 2 live albums. The reason I'm bringing those up is because we're about to hear one of those live albums. And my favourite thing while doing a little research on Rory Gallagher was that Brian May of Queen actually is quoted as saying that he owes his sound to Rory Gallagher because he sat down and actually took him through how he made his guitar sound the way it did. So very, very influential guitarist. And there's other guitarists like The Edge from U2 who also say that Rory Gallagher had a huge influence on their sound. So a shorter career than I think we all would have liked, but a very influential career. And the album we're going to be looking at today is called Irish Tour 1974. So let's just take a quick look at it. Irish Tour 1974 is one of the two Rory Gallagher live albums. It was released on the 21st of July 1974, which would probably make sense given it's called Irish Tour 74. It has a running time of 69 minutes 27, so it's pretty long, but only 10 tracks. And this is one of the beautiful things about live albums, and hopefully when we listen to this, it will be Rory Gallagher really going into it, extending the length of these songs, playing some longer tracks, putting in some solos, that sort of stuff. And without further messing around, I'm going to give it a listen because I'm excited to hear what Rory Gallagher has to play for us. When I was a teenager, I used to play a game with my friends where we would try and pick out our favourite albums, or what we call perfect albums, where we liked every song. And one of the rules we had was that we weren't allowed to use live albums or compilations. And I'm really glad that Tom Moon doesn't have that rule, because there is a beauty in a live album, especially a live album from a musician like Rory Gallagher. So Irish Tour 74 is one of my favourite albums of the 12 that we've had. And actually, despite the fact Bonnie Raitt was amazing and the Yardbirds were amazing, this is my favourite of the three from this episode, which is my favourite episode that we've done so far. And the reason for that is that Rory Gallagher is just an amazing guitarist. He gets incredible tone and he does things with the guitar that, you know, you just wish that you could do. And this includes things like great use of palm muting. So he does lots of his soloing and he puts in palm muting, but he also gets the guitar screaming and shrieking and just doing a whole raft of things. And on this live recording, he also plays a bit of acoustic, and he really shows a lot of breadth in his playing. His playing is very tasteful. He doesn't go too overboard. Everything he plays is you know, harmonic. It just sounds beautiful, start to finish. And another reason that I personally love it is that I'm a huge fan of Jimi Hendrix. He is my hero. He's my god. You know, and I also love people like Stevie Ray Vaughan, and this is an album that fits into that style. You know, you could put it next to a Jimmy album and a Stevie Ray Vaughan album, and it's all about the great guitar work. And I actually think that Rory Gallagher sings in a similar style to Hendrix a lot of the time as well. And that's one of the reasons, or one of the many reasons, that I love this album, and I strongly recommend a listen. It might seem long and over an hour in length, but it flies by. It's amazing. In fact, my favourite track and my first recommendation, Million Miles Away, is over 9 minutes, but it feels like it's about 30 seconds. And then immediately after, he plays a track called Walk on Hot Coals, and it's just, again, fantastic. It's so Hendrixy in the way it's played, and it's probably mean to him because he played in the same era as Hendrix, but no one compares to Hendrix for me, so I will say it's Hendrix-esque. It's not Jimmy, but it's really, really good. So yeah, please go away and listen, and now we'll find out what our expert made of Irish Tour 74 by Rory Gallagher. I'm quite glad to say that myself and Tom Moon, I think, are in agreement on why this definitely deserves to be in the 1,000 recordings to hear before you die, and it's largely because Rory Gallagher is a guitar genius, and he puts it more eloquently than I do in talking about the fact that he's a guitarist that is capable of the incredible, but only uses it when he wants to. So he says, you know, for a lot of the songs, he will march along playing a beautiful rhythm guitar, and it's only when he wants to tune up you see he's a true guitar virtuoso. And he's right. Cradle Rock, the first track of the album, the first 2 minutes, just Rory Gallagher basically saying, "Here I am, come worship at the feet of my guitar," and it just goes from there. And it's such an amazing collection of songs. What I didn't realise is it's not actually all from one concert. The reason it's called Irish Tour 74 is it's a collection of live recordings from all the shows he did in Ireland in 1974, which will explain why every song is so incredible. And that's quite cool actually. I don't really see many live album sort of compilations. And yeah, it's just magnificent. It's brilliant guitar work, and his recommendation is the same as mine. If you love good guitar, give this album a listen. It will not let you down. You'll be left thinking, I know what I left thinking is, the first thing I did was I picked up my guitar and I started playing some Hendrix because I just wanted to try and have a little bit more Rory Gallagher style guitar in my life. In terms of tracks that our expert picked out, Cradle Rock, the opening track, which I very nearly went for, I Wonder Who, Walk on Hot Coals, which is one of the ones I chose, Back on My Stomping Ground, and As the Crow Flies. So quite a few tracks again of the 10 he's chosen 5, but I can see why. I'm limiting myself to 2 just so I don't flood the playlist with one artist, but I easily could have taken any number of tracks off this absolutely majestic album, so please give it a listen. And that's our final album for this episode. Once again, thank you for joining me for episode 4 of the 1000 Recordings to Hear Before You Die. I hope you've enjoyed what I'm dubbing the Guitar Super episode. So we have had some Jeff Beck, some Jimmy Page, some Bonnie Raitt, and some Rory Gallagher, and I doubt our musical random generator is going to bless us with that many just legendary guitarists ever again. And I have to say, this was my favourite episode in terms of listening. I loved all 3 albums so much. I think Rory Gallagher one probably my favourite, mainly because it was such a lovely surprise. I knew a bit about Bonnie Raitt, I knew a bit about the Yardbirds. I had never really heard of Rory Gallagher, which is a crime really, as someone who considers himself a student of music, to not know about someone that great. But this is why I love doing this exercise. I'm learning an awful lot, and I hope you are too if you're listening along to these albums, or if you're interested. Please feel free to comment, by the way, on any of the stuff in these vlogs. But for now, I will leave you until next episode, where we will finally be entering the world of classical music. And yeah, apart from that, check out our other stuff if you're interested. And goodbye for now.